Welcome back. This is Story 2, The Left Paw. In a wood trained into silence by tribute and fear, one left-pawed hare carries more than baskets. He carries a decision. Tonight, the quiet breaks and deliverance comes through the hand no one watches. Let's begin. Story 2, The Left Paw, The Iron in the Altar. Shadows of the Way, a Judges Anthology. Chapter 1, The Yoke. 18 seasons under the Glon, and the high wood learned a new skill. How to disappear without leaving. How to make a whole village of burrows look like ordinary underbrush. This is how the high wood kept it afterward. By telling the story like a fence set into the ground, posts sunk deep, rails tight, so the old fear would not wander back in. Quiet didn't belong to that place. The high wood used to be loud as a living body, scratching, scolding, splashing, constant small claims of life. Foxes barked in the grass at dusk. Frogs worked the creek like drumline when the thaw came. Woodpeckers hit old beech trunks until the sound carried. Then the Glon took the lowlands and set his reach into the high wood, and noise became a price. Lift your voice, and something went missing. A sack from a pantry, a strip of fiber from a line, a young one who didn't come home from the path. After that, the Glon made an accounting of the high wood. He did it as bull kings do, by turning living things into numbers and then enforcing the numbers until everyone pretended the numbers were natural. Tribute arrived with no ceremony and no explanation that made any sense inside a burrow. One year it was baskets at the willow bend. The next it was the same, except lighter. Then it was the same again, except somebody's honey went south and didn't come back. And a pantry that used to last till frost ran out early. The collectors enforced it. They came out of the far marsh when the days were named, faces blank, eyes pond flat, tally sticks in hand, smelling of mud and cattail and sour rot. Most collections they didn't bother with speeches. They simply checked the baskets, grain, honey, fiber, by the notches on their sticks, and took the load where it sat, leaving the high wood to watch its own goods walk away on broad padded, web-creased hands. Sometimes they took extra, as if it always belonged to them. Sometimes they took a body. 18 turns of green up and die back, long enough for the young to think the hush was weather. Tribute spread the same way, at first confusing, then constant. It helped that the high wood was distracted when it started. Old keeper dead, no true successor, elders talking themselves hoarse while the lowlands cut fresh notches into the bark and pressed reed slick prints into paths that had never held them before. By the time the arguing ended, the system was already in the ground. They learned what the tally meant by living under it. A scoop from this store, a strip from that fleece. Comb still warm from the sun when it left the meadow. Berries dried hard as pebbles. Always just enough taken to hurt and not enough taken to end you. And when the collectors wanted to teach the lesson deeper, they took something you couldn't replace. A healthy young one. Strong legs, clear eyes. What happened after that wasn't a story the high wood told in daylight. Nobody needed the details to learn the shape of obedience. Odd saw the taking once at a burrow near the North Creek. A doe he barely knew stood in her doorway holding a sack that used to be heavy. Her kids watched from behind her legs, eyes fixed on the collector's broad hands. The doe kept smiling like a creature trying to keep the world from noticing it had teeth. When the collectors left, she looked down at what was left in her pantry and made a quick little sound. Almost a laugh, almost a cough. That night, one of the kits chewed bark until his gums bled. No one called it hunger out loud. So they complied. Anger didn't fill a belly. Confusion didn't stop a tally stick. They showed up on the days the far marsh named and left the baskets where they were told to leave them, by the willow bend at the North Creek, beside the same flat stone. Backs turned, breath held. That was the ordinary tax. The collectors came to pick it up. But once a year, the Glon demanded more than goods. He demanded a walk south and a face to bow. A larger, costlier tribute, enough to make the high wood feel it in winter, had to be carried down the reed path and handed over in person at the thorn wall, under the steward's count and the bull king's pond's flat stare. The point wasn't transport, it was the ritual. It was the reminder that the high wood's right paw still belonged to him. Living like that changes you. The muscles you don't use, joy, outrage, simple loudness, go soft. They started trading meaning in looks, in tiny motions. A tilt of the ears, a paw held up at the bend in the trail. Conversations that never left the throat. They learned the collector's routes like prey, by surviving, by watching for the reed shiver, the pause in bird song, the wrong weight on a path. And without quite meaning to, they began shaping their young around the marshman's pond flat, unblinking stare, patient as a tax measure, like an animal deciding what it can carry. Don't stand tall. Don't run first. Don't be the one who looks strong when a stranger is measuring the season. Some prayed away. Not the young ones mostly. The Ancient of Days was an elder story to them, told like he told stories about winters you didn't live through. Half warning, half comfort, and easy to doubt when your belly was empty. The Glon's real theft wasn't the honey or the grain, it was that. The wood's memory of itself. The knowledge that things used to be different and could be again. The old ones kept at it. Sorrow the badger, older than the tribute, her name a joke that turned into a record. 2 owls in the central oak, so old their feathers looked dusty even when the rain had washed the rest of the world clean. They watched from up high and refused to call the silence final. Salt, the rabbit doe, who kept the Warren's ledgers in her head and had buried 3 kits for reasons that had nothing to do with the Glon. She prayed like a creature bargaining. Not many, enough. Then, in the 18th season, the Ancient of Days finally moved. Chapter 2, Odd. His name was Odd. It stuck early. Back when he was a leveret and his mother noticed the left paw doing all the work while the right hung there like it was waiting for permission. She watched him a minute and then said, not cruel, not joking, just exact, "This one's going to be trouble." He was a hare, not a rabbit. The Warren cared. Odd quit caring around his 3rd year. He ran longer in the leg than the rabbits and carried that hare look, like he might be doing nothing at all while his body kept a second plan ready. His ears were built for catching everything. Under the Glon, that was a gift and a curse. Ember eyes, wide set, always tracking. Creatures talking to him felt noticed, and some of them didn't like it. He was left-pawed in a right-pawed wood. That wasn't a quaint detail. Right was the paw you offered first. Right swore the oaths. Right struck. In council, the greeting was right paw to right paw. Old habit. Older than some burrows. The left was what you used when your real paw was busy. Helpful. Secondary. A creature who led with the left felt to the Warren's tidy little rules like a door hung backwards on its hinges. Odd grew up watching faces decide what he was before he opened his mouth. He moved wrong, spoke wrong, timed himself wrong. Too quick when everyone wanted ceremony, too still when the rest of them were stampeding. He said what he meant and didn't lace it with the politeness the elders expected, which made them call him reckless when the real problem was simpler. He didn't play along. Even the ones who liked him admitted the truth. In a crisis, you wanted Odd near you. In the slow, ordinary hours, he could grind your nerves down to powder. 18 seasons under the Glon, and he still carried one offense the wood couldn't forgive. He didn't look afraid. He was afraid plenty. The first year he carried tribute south, the collectors stared through him like he was a sack that might hold something worth stealing. Kept his breathing smooth anyway. Learned how. He remembered the first time he had heard it. The sound of a young one being pulled out of line. Not shouting, something worse. A thin, sudden scramble, and then the quiet that followed. The kind that makes every ear in the wood point in the same direction. Once, on the way back, he stepped into a soft spot and went down hard, mud up to his chest, basket straps biting, pride leaking out of him like spit. He sat there for a second with the stomach rolling. He had the ugly thought that maybe the Warren deserved the Glon, if this was all it took to make him look away. Then he got up, wiped his face, carried on. He was afraid now too. The thorn lay flat against his right thaw. The thorn wall waited ahead in the afternoon heat, hawthorn packed so tight it looked like a bruise on the horizon. Fear showed up. That part was easy. The work was deciding what it got to control. Over 3 years, he became the one who carried the tribute south. No one called him an honor. They picked a creature who wouldn't steal from his own. They picked a creature who could carry the woods best to the enemy and keep his face still while he did it. The collectors could smell fear. They watched for it, ears flicking, eyes half-lidded, waiting for the tribute bearer to flinch so next year could grow teeth. Odd learned to walk the reed path like it belonged to him. Ears loose, pace unhurried, a smell that said he was only passing through. All that time, another weight rode with him, the thing against his thigh. He called it a thorn because saying knife out loud felt like inviting it to happen. This wasn't a briar you brushed past. He'd made it. Black hawthorn from the eastern stand. He cut the spine, cured it, and worked on it for months with the whetstone he kept wrapped in cloth. The burrow filled with the faint dry rasp of it at night, shavings piled up like pepper on the packed earth. When he finished, it was the length of his foreleg, 2 edges, dark wood polished smooth where his grip would sit. Thin enough to lie flat under his carrying cloak, pressed to his right thigh so steady it started to feel like bone. He told himself he hadn't decided. Some nights he believed that. Some nights he lay awake and counted the turns of the whetstone in his head like a confession. He had a plan in the back of him, sharp as a thorn point, ugly as the work it demanded. He also had the other thought, the one he hated. Maybe he was only brave in his own burrow. The ancient days had been quiet for 18 seasons. Odd kept waiting for something, anything, that said this wasn't just his private madness dressed up as duty. There was a horn in the high wood kept for old days, for feast days and emergencies. Kept where a sensible creature wouldn't go. Odd went anyway once and came back with it under his cloak. No one mentioned it. That was its own kind of permission. In the turning season of the 18th year, he carried the tribute south again. On the way back, the world answered him. Chapter 3, the tribute. The annual tribute party was 7. Odd, 4 Warren rabbits with the grain baskets biting into their shoulders. Grizz the badger, old and thick through the neck, counting with a scratch stick, and Pip, a young vole whose father sat on the old elder council and had decided his son should learn what tribute did to a body. They carried what wood could spare, only by bleeding, grain packed to sedge-woven baskets, heavy enough that the rabbits leaned forward as they walked, ears angled down, breath working. Honeycomb sealed under wax, still faintly warm if you pressed a paw to the lid. Fiber bundled tight. The smell of lanolin and dry grass trapped inside it. All of it had been gathered door to door. A scoop from this door, a strip from that fleece. Loaded before sunrise while the high wood pretended it wasn't watching. The lowlands announced themselves before you saw them. A damp stink slid up the ridge and into your nose. Still water, reed pulp, mud baked, and re-wet and baked again. Under it, the old dark, something that had been rotting in place for longer than any creature could count. I tasted it in the back of his tongue, and as they came down the road, Pip found out what it felt like at the border. 2 collectors waited where the willows thinned. Same place every year. Tally sticks ready. Eyes pond flat as slate. They were big, lowland big. Broad-footed, low to the ground, stained the color of marsh water. They had the patience of things that didn't have to chase. They only had to stand there while you came to them. They checked the load against the marks, a blunt finger tracing each notch, a notch cut into the wood, a point of the stick south. Their mercy was taking only what the tally said. They went on. Reed path underfoot, water on both sides, dragonflies skittering above the mud like they had somewhere else to be. The Glon held court in the thorn wall. Hawthorn, ancient and vicious. A stand grown so dense you could barely see into it from the outside. Thorns braided together over years and storms until the whole thing became a fortress made of living needles. Inside, passages had been worried open by generations of hooves and servants' feet. Chambers cut out by use. At the top, a platform open to the sky, covered by a thorn lattice that broke the sun into strips. That upper room stayed cooler when the marsh below turned heavy and hot. The Glon liked it up there. The thorn wall stank in layers. Hawthorn blossomed sweetness when it was in season. Under that, a trapped air of crowded rooms that never really aired out, old sweat, old meals, old waste, grease rubbed into the thorn wood by 100 hands. Odd had noticed it on his first trip, and his body still argued with it every time. A little gag at the back of his throat, tightening of the belly. He kept his face still anyway. I noticed a hawthorn for practical reasons. This wood grew the longest thorns he'd ever seen, black, hard, built to punch through hide. Of course, the Glon lived inside it. Odd kept that thought to himself and let it sit there sharp and quiet. The Glon was a bull. Odd had seen bigger bodies. He hadn't seen one carry itself like this. The Glon sat in a carved chair in the main hall and made the room adjust around him. Old bull, hide dulled by years. The gray-brown sheen of something that had stopped caring how it looked. Flies landed and left without him flicking an ear. His eyes were small and dark. They didn't wander. They measured. He'd held power so long, the holding had settled into his face like an extra layer of skin. I brought the tribute forward. He set it down where the stewards could paw through it. He bowed the way the high wood had learned to bow. Right paw out, always the right. A clean offering of the part of the rules you recognized. Glon stared at all the goods like he could taste them from his chair. His stewards counted, scratched, recounted, correct. The high wood keeps its obligations, the Glon said. His voice came from deep in him, slow and heavy, like you could hear the size of his lungs doing the work. The high wood is honored to serve, Odd said. Required words. He delivered them clean. Nothing extra in his face, nothing in his ears. The real sentence stayed behind his teeth where it couldn't be used against him. He bowed again, turned, collected his party, northbound. Odd turns back alone. At the border willows, Odd slowed. He let the others drift ahead until the reeds swallowed them, until the distance between him and them stopped being distance and started being a choice. He told Gris he'd left a counting mark on the second basket, the kind that would throw the steward's tally, and needed to go back and confirm the count. Gris watched him with those old badger eyes, quiet and blinking, not fooled exactly, just aware that Odd was spending his last lie on something that mattered. He didn't ask for more. He'd lived long enough to know when a question was a luxury. Go, Gris said. One word. That was how Gris spent his breath. He didn't ask about marks. He didn't tell Odd to take a friend. He just looked at him like he'd been taking notes for 18 seasons and then turned north with the others. I'd watched them until the willows swallowed the last flick of an ear. Then he turned back to the lowlands. Afternoon light on the reeds, his paw finding the same packed track. No one beside him. No one to hear the sound he made when he swallowed. The thorn wall waited, the narrow passage, the upper chamber. The thorn rode his right thigh. Every step made it speak, steady pressure through cloth and fur, not pain or minder. He carried it south 3 times. First trip, he'd still been learning the halls, learning the steward's habits, learning how long a guard could stare at you before his eyes slid away. Second trip, Thornwall was crowded wrong. Too many servants in the upper runs. A delegation from the eastern marshes. The Glon schedule bent, and a bent schedule got you killed. This trip, the heat had driven bodies down into the lower chambers. The upper ways were thin. The Glon had taken the tribute, then retreated, like he always did, to the cool room where he could pretend the world existed to please him. Everything sat in its place, even the danger. That morning on the high wood side, a blackbird had been singing from the top of the central oak, full voice, no caution, like nothing in it had learned to be quiet. Odd had stopped on the path, the tribute, on his back, and listened until his ears hurt with wanting. It was only a bird. It didn't know the Glon's name. It didn't know what the collectors did with strong young bodies. Still, the sound hit him like truth, old truth. And because it existed at all, in a wood trained to hush, told him something had shifted. Not in the lowlands, in him. He didn't weep. He wasn't built that way. He just stood there letting the song do its work. The song didn't give him a plan. He already had that. It gave him permission to stop pretending he was just waiting for this one. Something in him clicked into place. Quiet. Final. He needed a cue small enough to obey without negotiating. When the bird stopped, he would go. The blackbird stopped. Odd went south. Chapter 4. The Sculptor's Stones. The Sculptor's Stones stood off the formal crossing, east of the border willows, where the high wood thinned and the reed beads started to breathe their wet breath up the slope. Old stones placed before the Glon, before tribute, before anyone in the warren learned to keep their voice behind their teeth. Upright slabs with cuts and grooves worked into them. Signs the young couldn't read and the elders read like a scar, partial, careful, unwilling to guess. The very oldest stories said the stones had been set by creatures following an order they didn't fully understand. I came to them in his second southbound. He took the eastern path instead of the reed track, longer, rougher, fewer eyes. It bought him minutes. It bought him quiet. Ash trees ringed the stones, pale trunks, slick where rain had run, leaf shadows jumping on the ground as the afternoon wind worried the canopy. The air smelled of sap and damp bark and the first hint of marsh. The stones didn't care about any of it. They just stood there. cold under the light, like they'd outlasted worse weather than fear. He was going to kill the Glon. He'd lived with the idea long enough it stopped feeling like an idea. The thorn under his cloak, the upper passage that pinched where the bowl couldn't follow, the cool room at the top where the Glon went when days got thick. He'd been setting pieces down for 3 years. He still hadn't let himself call it certain, not out loud, not even the back of his throat. Among the stones, his excuses ran out. He stood close to the oldest slab and traced one cut with a claw. Shallow, worn, the grove packed with old grit. Nothing moved, no voice, no thunder. The stomach dropped away. Clean animal certainty, the kind that makes your mouth go dry. He didn't decide so much as realize he'd been decided for. 3 years of doubt had kept him sharp. He was a hare with a carved thorn and a lie ready in his tongue. One wrong hallway, one wrong servant, one guard deciding he was interesting for the first time. That wasn't cowardice. It was how you stayed alive while you built the thing this ugly. Now his body shifted into the next gear. He felt it in his shoulders first, the way his feet set themselves, and how his ears stopped twitching at every small sound. He looked from stone to marsh, and he knew he was walking back to the thorn wall alone. He fit the job, not like a hero, like a tool. Left-pawed in a right-pawed wood, familiar enough inside the thorn wall to be ignored, small enough for the upper runs, mean enough to make a hawthorn spine into a blade and keep working it with his paws cramped. If the Ancient of Days was choosing instruments, he'd chosen a strange one. I'd swallowed at the thought and felt no comfort in it. Certainty didn't make it easier. His heart was hammering. His throat kept trying to close. He stood in the ash grove, talking to himself like a fool, and then, without any permission from fear, he started moving again. The Ancient appears. A reed hissed in the edge of the grove. Odd turned. A figure stood where ash grove met open marsh. Huge, yes, bigger than Odd, bigger than Gris. Odd didn't care about the size after the first blink. Light didn't behave right around him. He stood in the shadow, no sun behind him, no torch. Still, Odd could see him clear. Light leaked at his edges. The reeds near him looked bleached. When his gaze caught Odd's, it was too bright to name. Odd's eyes watered, his throat locked. He forgot to breathe. 2 small burn rings marked the mud where his feet rested. The Ancient of Days sees the high wood, the creature said. His voice wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. He sees 18 seasons of tribute and silence. He has heard the prayers of the ones who still pray. I felt his left paw twitch at this side. The thorn lay hard against his right thigh. In, out, his lungs tried to remember their job. What am I to do? He said. The creature looked at him, and Odd had the sixth sense there was nowhere inside him to hide. Gris, the whetstone, the lie. Odd's face stayed calm. It didn't matter. He felt caught. What your left paw is prepared to do, the creature said. Go, I will be with you. Odd blinked. The figure was gone. The burned rings and the reeds still smoked, thin as breath. Odd stayed among the stones until the smoke quit. Then he went south. Chapter 5, The Secret Mission. Back to Thornwall. He came back to Thornwall when the light started to yellow and thin, that hour when day pretends it has time left. The guards at the outer thorn passage were the same ones as before, broad feet planted, muck-stained hides. A patience that wasn't kindness. Nothing surprising ever happened there. That was the point. I had spent 3 years teaching them to look past him. I left a counting mark on the second basket, he told the outer guard. It'll throw the steward's tally if it isn't confirmed. They'll send a runner after me anyways once they notice. The guard stared at him like he was weighing grain by sight, tally stick resting in his broad hand. Odd held still. Behind the guard, the thorn passages breathed. Servants moving, stewards counting, the whole place busy with the nuisance of numbers. It happened often enough to be ordinary. The steward finding a basket light by a notch and sending the bearer back into the reeds to fix it. The guard's eyes slid off, decided, not worth the trouble. Steward's room, the guard said. I know the route, Odd said. Inside the thorn wall swallowed the last of the outside light. Odd walked past the turn what would take him to the stewards. He kept going because the stewards meant questions, and questions meant a name written down somewhere. He needed the thorn wall to remember him as a blur of routine, not as a creature who stood in the doorway. He went into the passage, narrowed, and the air turned stale. He stopped where the upper room began. Not at the mouth of it, but a body length back, in the shadow that kept a passerby from seeing him at a glance. Let his eyes get used to the dim. Let his ears range, a drip somewhere, a servant shifting weight in a lower hall, the thornwood creak of the wall itself. Then he listened for the one sound that mattered. Above him, the Glon. The upper room carried sound like a throat where the halls below went still. And I had learned over the 3 years what a bull that size sounded like when he was alone and satisfied. A slow pull of air, a long let go, comfortable breathing, awake. Odd pictured the cool upper chamber, the thorn lattice, the draft, the chair that fit him like a throne. Good. Let him be settled. Let him be lazy. Odd went up. The upper run pinched tight, servant width, not bull width. Odd moved through it fast and low, ears flattened, fur brushing thorn-woven walls. His paws made almost no sound on the packed floor, almost. At the top waited a door made of braided thorn branches, tight as a cage. He knocked. Silence. Then the Glon's voice from inside, deeper up close, thick with authority. Who comes? The tribute bearer from the high woods, Odd said. I carry a message, my lord. A private message, not for the stewards. Silence again. Odd could feel the bull on the other side of the door, deciding whether to bother. A message without stewards meant leverage. An elder begging, a secret bargain, a rumor he could use. Curiosity won. Usually did. Enter, Glon said. Chapter 6. The Upper Chamber. The upper chamber was cool. Everything else in the thorn wall sweated. Everything else smelled like bodies and old grease and wet reed mud drying up in fur. Up here the air moved. It didn't forgive, but it moved. A thorn lattice opened the roof to the sky. Late afternoon light fell through. Broken strips. Shadow. Bright. A thorn lattice opened to the roof, the sky. Late afternoon light fell through in broken strips. Shadow. Bright. Shadow again. A ridge breeze slipped through the gaps and brought a smell the lowlands never owned. Pine resin, turned earth, cold water running over stone. It reached the bull's favorite room like a quiet insult. The Glon sat alone, one chair, one creature who expected to be sat above. Odd stepped into the doorway and felt the bull's attention land on him. Automatic at first, quick measure, quick dismissal. Then the eyes stayed a half beat longer than they usually did because Odd had said private, and bulls liked anything that promised advantage. Small eyes, dark, made for counting and claiming. A private message, the Glon said. Yes, my lord, from the high wood elders. Odd let the silence sit. He watched the Glon wait for the expected lie. Not from the elders, my lord, he said. The Glon's posture changed. Not much. A forehoof set wider, neck tightening. The room felt smaller around him. Speak, the Glon said. Odd said, I have a message from the Ancient of Days for you, O king. Stillness. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate in the thorn lattice. The Glon rose. Odd had expected a laugh, a sneer, a hoof stamping the floor. He'd expected anything that kept the bull seated. But the name did what names do when they're older than you are. The Glon pushed himself up, slow and heavy, as if the room had to give him permission to stand. Standing, He wasn't a ruler in a chair anymore. He was a wall, hide and muscle and fat, breath hot in his throat. The upper chamber had been built for him and still looked small. Odd didn't give him time to finish standing tall. This was the only window that mattered. While the bull's weight was still shifting, while attention was still on the name and not on Odd's body, and Odd reached across his body with his left paw, because the Glon's eyes tracked the right, greeting paw, oath paw, striking paw. The left was what you used when the real paw was busy. The bull's habits were the same as the wood's. That was the opening. He drew the thorn from his right thigh, black hawthorn, double-edged, 4-leg long, 1 step in. Odd drove it into Glon's belly with his left paw, his strong paw, the paw the bull didn't watch. He buried it deep to the grip. Let go. The Glon made a sound that wasn't language, not quite a cry, not quite a bellow, more like surprise, made audible. He had lived 18 seasons believing size was armor. In one breath, that belief split. He was fat. The belly took the thorn and hid it. For a second, the wound looked almost polite. Just fur and a small wrongness where the blade had gone. Then Glon stared down like he couldn't place what he was seeing. Lifted a forehoof and pressed it to his gut, slowly, carefully, as if to touch it could make the fact untrue. His legs quit on him. He went down slow, not a dramatic topple, a heavy sag, like the joints forgot their agreement. The chair caught him. It was built for that weight. When he settled, it sounded like a sack of wet earth hitting the ground. Final. The silence after was loud. Afterward, telling it, they kept 3 details. The left paw, the one you didn't offer in greeting, the one you kept back for work. The thorn left in the Glon, no trophy to carry home, no proof to polish, only the weight of it, lodged in enemy flesh, and the bull standing when the name was spoken, not in honor, but like a caught animal, as if something older than the thorn wall had hooked his spine for one long breath and reminded him, kings still answer. Then the air turned sour, hot blood, bile, heavy sweetness on the edge of rot. Odd didn't wait. He pictured this for 3 years, and the picture didn't include standing around. He turned for the doors before the smell could finish spreading. He slipped through a woven thorn door and into a narrow upper run. The door fell shut behind him with dry brush, and the upper passage swallowed sound down below. Servants were still there in their waiting places, trained not to look up unless the Glon called. Now he used the hare body, fast, low, silent except for the small brush of his fur on the thorn wood. He hit the main hall at a run. A junior guard half turned at the sound, mouth already shaping a question, but saw the tribute bearer's cloak in the direction he was coming from and let the question die. He didn't question a tribute bearer coming down from the bull's room, not while the day still looked normal. He didn't risk the main hall a second time. The thorn wall had old servant runs, air gaps and ash chutes cut between the thorn roots, meant for smoke and scrapes and small bodies that didn't get noticed. Odd slid in one of those seams where the wall pinched narrow, ears flattened, shoulders turning sideways. Thorn scraped fur. His breath sounded loud in his own skull. He kept moving anyway, because the hare body fit where a bull body never could. The chute led him out behind the outer lattice, where the hawthorn thinned into a snag of dead branches and the marsh breeze could get a hand in. He pushed through, belly low, and dropped into the reeds on the lowland side, without ever putting his face in front of the gate. Behind him, the thorn wall stood, whole and ordinary. In front of him, the lowlands took him back, like nothing had happened yet. Chapter 7, The Locked Door. The servants knew something was wrong when the smell found them. Up to that point, the day had behaved. The tribute bearer came, the door to the upper chamber shut, the hall below stayed quiet. They waited in the lower passage because waiting was part of the job. You didn't hurry a bull like the Glon. You learned that lesson once and carried it the rest of your life. The afternoon slid. Light through the thorn lattice thinned from gold to the dull gray That means that evening is on its way, whether you're ready or not. Then the smell came down the passage. At first it was just a sour edge and a stale air. Then it got teeth, hot blood, and gut sweet rot. Kind of stink that makes creatures swallow hard and blink like the eyes can clean the nose. They looked at each other and chose the safest interpretation. The Glon was handling his private business. A bull that size did that often. The servants had learned the rhythms, learned how long not to be seen. The eldest servant finally cleared his throat. They argued in low voices for long minutes before anyone dared to touch the key. His feet were flat and wide, marsh-muscled, built for mud and long service. We should check. It would not be appropriate. He has been some time, the eldest said. He's been some time before, said another. The eldest servant had the key, a twisted piece of thorn wood, worn smooth where claws had worried it for years. He lifted it like he expected the Glon to rise up out of the lock and strike him for daring. The key turned. The door gave with a soft scrape. The upper chamber had been dark for an hour. Evening air slid down through the lattice, cooling now. No pine scent left in it, just the lowlands cooling off. The Glon sat in his chair. He was going to remain in his chair. No one spoke. For several breaths, the room tried to make the stink mean something else. A burst gut, a summer fever, a bull's private sickness. Anything that didn't require new rules. And even when the oldest servant's eyes fixed on Glon's belly and found the black line of it, the Thornwall's habits held. No one below the upper chamber had authority to seal the outer crossings without the steward's order. Orders traveled slow in a place built on fear. The eldest servant found his voice first. Find the tribute bearer. The tribute bearer had been the last outsider admitted to the upper room. If this was sickness, he might have brought it. If it was poison, he might have carried it. Either way, he was the only name they could speak that wasn't their own. Feet hit the passages, doors opened, names got hissed down the corridors. The tribute bearer was gone from the thorn wall, gone from the reed paths, gone from the marsh. By the time the first search parties pushed out of the thorn wall, Odd was already north. The thorn wall's first minutes had been spent arguing and fetching keys and naming scapegoats. Odd had spent those same minutes on distance. He cut through the ash grove by the sculpture stones, with his lungs burning and his ears pinned back. No more patience left in him. No more pretending. He climbed the ridge above the warren, and the last of the light stopped at the high point. He reached into his carrying cloak. The stolen weight was there, familiar against his ribs. The ridge call. The one you didn't sound unless you meant the wood to answer. A horn, curved elder wood, hollowed thin. He lifted it, blew. The sound tore through the dark and ran the whole length of the high wood. After that, no one said the silence had lasted 18 seasons. They said the wood had been holding its breath. Chapter 8. The Horn and the Fords. Creatures started coming out of the burrows like they'd been holding their breath, and someone finally told them they're allowed to inhale. Plenty stayed hidden. 18 seasons had trained them. Risk had become habit, reflex, something you obeyed without thinking. Others came anyway, the ones who still had prayer on their mouths or anger or both. They followed the horn's echo through the trees and found Odd on a ridge, silhouetted against what was left of the night. I told them what mattered. The Glon is dead, he said. I've seen what the thorn wall does when anything goes wrong with the count, when a basket comes up light, when a mark doesn't match. They send reed runners at first light because daylight makes the marsh safe for fast feet. When a king dies, they'll send them everywhere. By morning, they'll be moving. Tonight is what we have. They stared at him and could see the split. The ones who heard freedom and the ones who heard retaliation because 18 seasons had trained their bodies to expect the Talistic's answer. Some named him Deliverer under the breath. Some named him Curse. Either way, they came to the ridge. He said, "The Ancient of Days has given the lowlands into our paw." He didn't try to sell him anything. He stood there with the burn rings still fresh in his mind and let the words sit in the air, heavy as an order. A few steps forward, and then more. Salt was one of the first. Small body, steady eyes, the Warren's numbers living behind her teeth. When she moved, others moved too, because fear had taught them what creatures did not waste motion. Odd didn't call for everyone. He called for the ones who could move. Gris sent Pip to wake the nearest burrows, and Salt to pull 2 quick counters from the Warren, creatures who knew paths by touch and could run in the dark without breaking a twig. Others slipped ahead of their as scouts, taking the creekside track to border willows. The fords were not far, an hour hard if you kept to the quiet ways. But a night like this, an hour was the difference between a choke point held and a choke point lost. They went south under the sky with no moon, taking the quiet paths to collections. They went south under the sky with no moon, taking the quiet paths the collectors had used on them for 18 seasons. The dark didn't feel friendly. It felt familiar. Chapter 9, The Fords. For lowlands bodies moving in numbers, and for collectors hauling gear in confidence, the boundary fords were the only clear path back up north. The word broke at first light. The body found, the tribute bearer missing, the shape of it snapping into focus. The thorn wall tried to answer as it always answered, by sending runners, but the first minutes were eaten by shouting in the passages and stewards arguing who could give which order. Even so, any lowland creature who ran for the high wood had one route, the willows and the shallow crossing beneath them. No side paths, no secret bridge. Odd's band took the choke point, while the thorn wall was still tripping over its own chain of command. Odd's band held it low and quiet. They were smaller, so let the reeds do the work. Bodies pressed into wet streams, paws sunk in mud, breath kept small until it had to be spent. They came in the gray. First couple scouts, trying to move like the old days still applied. Then more, pushed out of the reed beds by rumor and instinct, not command. Glon was dead. The high wood was no longer quiet. Outposts had no clear orders, only the oldest rule of them all. Get north before whoever replaces the Glon decides who pays next. Flat-footed marsh brutes, broad backs, hooks and cudgels meant for hauling baskets and bodies, not for holding ground. They slogged through cold water with the hard, ugly urgency of creatures who had just realized the world's spine had snapped. They hit the willows and found teeth waiting. It was quick. Quick doesn't mean gentle. Mud sucked at ankles, willow branches snapped back into faces. Someone went down in the water and came up coughing and red. The lowland fighters weren't used to being stopped. Tribute had taught them that bodies moved when they arrived, that baskets went south without argument. Their first mistake was charging like the ford belonged to them. Their second mistake was surprise. Odd didn't dress it up afterward. He didn't call it glorious. It was work done in the dark, so the morning could belong to someone else. The highwood fighters were smaller. They had something the marsh didn't. Not hunger for new land, not the Glon's habit of taking because that's how you stayed in charge. They fought with the old picture of in their heads. The wood loud again. Burrow doors open after dusk. A young one running without checking who was watching. That memory made their hands steady when the water turned slick. Gris fought without hurry, old badger weight, old badger patience. They picked a place at the edge of the water and kept putting lowland bodies back where they came from. Sol arrived out of the dark line like she'd been summoned by her own prayers. Rabbit doe, ledger keeper, a hawthorn branch in her paws. She planted herself at the narrowest point and looked out at the oncoming marsh creatures, like she's already written the ending down and was only waiting for them to catch up. By sunrise, the lowlands belonged to fear instead of tribute. In the lowlands, without the Glon's weight holding the marshmen into one will, orders turned into guesses. Outposts waited for commands that never came. Collectors who had enforced the tally for 18 seasons suddenly had only their hides to defend. Fear scattered what tribute had organized. When it was done, Odd stood in the ford with willow leaves trembling overhead. South of him reeds, still, no collectors stepping out, no tally stick tapping a basket rim. The quiet that settled now wasn't the old quiet. That one had been forced, heads down, voices locked away. This quiet felt like a door finally shut behind an enemy. He was breathing hard. He put his right paw in the cold current in his left. The water ran over his fur and kept running, indifferent. He thought about the thorn. It was still in the Glon's gut, deep in the fat, lost to him. No taking it back, no cleaning it, no hanging it up like a trophy. It had done its work and disappeared into the enemy. He straightened. The shaking in his breath had finally eased, and the easing left space for the only thing he knew to do with space like that. He prayed. Liturgy of the Road. Ancient of Days. You saw the high wood. You said you saw it, and I believe you did, because I was there when you said it, and the reed bed still held your marks after you were gone. I was a left-pawed hare who made a thorn in a burrow and told a counting mark story to an old badger and stood at the sculptured stones in the late afternoon, looking at the carvings I could not read, waiting for something I could not name. You were the thing that I was waiting for without knowing it. The Glon is dead and the lowlands are quiet and the blackbird is singing. I am standing at the ford with cold water over my paws, trying to learn what comes after the only work I knew to build. I think what comes next is the high wood remembering is allowed to be loud. I will help. I will use the left paw the way you gave it to me. You do not find a great warrior or a noble elder at the stones. You found a hare with a thorn under his cloak and a lie ready for the guards. If that was what you wanted, then here I am. If you need the left paw again, I will be at the stones. In the high wood, the saying is, the right paw keeps the peace, the left paw breaks the yoke. End of the left paw. Next, Deborah and Jael, the obsidian tent.